Hello and welcome to today's session, which is about brain retraining fundamentals or the underlying principles that permeate all of the brain retraining programs. So, regardless of what program you're doing, the topics that we will be covering here today are the important pieces that underlie the transformational nature of brain and nervous system retraining and are really important for us to ensure that we're doing and including in whatever program or programs we're using. And so, the first step or the first piece that's important is to cultivate our curious observer. So, our curious observer is that part of ourselves that can step into that place of seeing what's going on internally, right? So, whether it's noticing what your thoughts are, noticing your emotional state, perhaps noticing the where your nervous system is at or the state of regulation or dysregulation that your nervous system is in. We want to really be able to cultivate that part of us that can really witness these things because we cannot change what we're not aware of. So the first step in changing our brain and nervous system is to become aware of what's happening. So there's many different ways that we can support ourselves in cultivating our curious observer. Meditation and mindfulness practices definitely are at the top of the list. Another simple idea or tool that you can use, especially if you're new to this, would be to set your timer periodically throughout the day. And when the timer goes off, you tune in. Okay, what was I just thinking in this moment? What am I feeling right now? What state is my nervous system in? To start to cultivate that practice of kind of taking a moment to reflect and tune in to those inner experiences. And then once we have that cultivated curious observer, we can move on to the next step in the retraining process, which really is two parts. So we've got the part of reinforcing alternative neural circuits that we're trying to create and move towards. And we've got the part of pruning away the old maladaptive pathways or in our brain or habitual patterns in our nervous system that are keeping us kind of stuck in our current experience or getting in the way of being able to create the health and well-being that we're trying to achieve. And so both of these parts are important, right? We want to stop stimulating and stop feeding the old pathways. And equally, we need to have something for our focus, energy, and attention to go towards, which is the stimulation and the reinforcement of the alternative patterns and alternative neural circuitry. So, removing or stopping the stimulation of the old patterns comes from this place of, first of all, identifying when we're in them and actively engaging to change what's happening internally in our thoughts, in our emotions, in our nervous system, in our behaviors that will allow us to move out of those pathways. And then the reinforcement of the new alternative neural circuits means elevating our emotional state. It often includes mental rehearsal or preparing our brain for change, right? So we're preparing our system to have a different normal or a new normal. It includes visualizations of health and well-being and creating the nervous system capacity or flexibility to be able to move into a ventral vagal or a very regulated state that supports this process, right? And so these are really important pieces in order to make the progress. And so it's a good idea to kind of stop every once in a while and reflect. And it's like, okay, how am I doing with my curious observer? How am I doing with catching the old pathways and reinforcing the alternative neural circuitry? Right. And then remembering that really the key to all of this is repetition, repetition, repetition. The more you do it, the more you stop the reinforcement of the old and reinforce the new through actively engaging in that, focusing our energy and intention and awareness and elevated emotion in that direction, the more you're going to get those pathways on board and basically because of neuroplasticity, both in our brain and in our nervous system, as we continue to reinforce that alternative neural circuitry. You can think of it like, at first it might be like trying to walk along a dirt pathway through the woods that has a lot of brush and undergrowth and whatever, right? And then the more we use that path, the more it becomes, a clear, strong pathway, and eventually becoming a super highway, right? Where there is no resistance or no interference with us being able to really fire those pathways. And so that's what happens through the repetition, right? Through the repetition, we're able to really create quick signals down that pathway. Those networks get stronger, and there's more networks that start to attach to them. So over time, that becomes our new normal. This becomes the new dominant way that the brain works. But while we're in the process of retraining, while we're in the process of transition, we can often be kind of back and forth between the old paths and habits and the new ones. And so this is why the process of recovery is not just a linear of getting better, better, better. It's the upheaval, right? The up and down, the ebbs and flows that happen depending on which pathway is dominant at any given time. And yet, when we keep our focus on the future and we go the distance and we keep that understanding and awareness of this fluctuation is normal, this is part of the rewiring process, and I'm going to keep actively reaching for what I am creating in my brain and in my nervous system, eventually those dips and that volatility dies down, and we start to really see the dominance of the new normal, the new state of being. Now, there's a couple of other things that aren't necessarily included in all of the programs, but I think are paramount and certainly worth keeping in mind as you're going through this recovery process. The first one would be cultivating self compassion. So we need to have, and often it's a change for people to come into relationship with a loving, kinder, gentler relationship with ourselves. The vast majority of brain retrainers tend to be high achievers, maybe type A personalities, perfectionists. We tend to have a really strong inner critic. We tend to be much harder on ourselves and hold ourselves to much higher standards than we do other people. And so we need to change that dynamic. We need to change that relationship with ourselves to come into more loving kindness, to come into more compassion of where we're at and how this process is going, in order to facilitate an ease of the process, right? So for example, if you're going through those ebbs and flows and things have been going well and all of a sudden they're not, and as soon as they're not, you've got your inner critic on you saying, you're not good enough. What's wrong with you? Why can't you just get this? You can see how that would reinforce the maladaptive neural circuitry that would probably keep you in that ebb a lot longer than if we step into it from a place of self compassion, recognizing that we're struggling right now, that this is part of the process, that this too shall pass as we continue to keep our focus forward and do the things that we need to do in order to change. That's going to be a very different dynamic. And so this is where I believe that self compassion is a foundation, especially when we're looking at not just overcoming symptoms, but cultivating resilience, cultivating that sustainable well being. Our relationship with ourselves plays a big role in that. Another piece that is included in some programs, but not others, is a level of acceptance. And so, acceptance is about accepting where we're at and what's happening in the present moment. It's not the same as resignation, right? So, accepting where we're at doesn't mean that we don't want it to change. It just means we're not going to waste our energy and resources fighting against what's already happening, what's already here, right? And so it's that awareness of, okay, this is where I'm at. And instead of fighting against where we're at, we then put our energy towards, and what can I do in this moment to support myself in the best way that I know how to help me through this time, to help me navigate. And so that's what I mean by acceptance. And then the last piece that I think is really important is a connection to something greater than ourselves. And this doesn't have to be a religious or spiritual figure, although if it is, that's great, if that's what fits for you. It could be nature. It could be that oneness consciousness or higher level of consciousness that's out there. It could be the life force energy that permeates all living things, that knowing that we're all connected in some way. And when we sense into that connection, we can start to intentionally invite it to support us or invite our system to feel supported by it. And the reason that this is important is because when we don't feel connected to something greater than ourselves, we feel like it's all on us. The weight of the world is on our shoulders. We have to do it all ourselves, and there's not that level of support available to us. And that creates a lot more stress, right? That creates a lot of anxiety. That's a really heavy weight to carry. Whereas if we sense into nature, for example, we sense into the electromagnetic field of the earth that resonates with our electromagnetic field, and it vibrates at a level that is the same hertz as our regulated nervous system, and we tune into that and know that that's supporting us in that regulation and that well-being. This is just an example, it could be something different for you, but as we sense into that, we can let go of that burden of this is all on me and I'm doing it myself. And this is where I see, people who can connect to something greater typically can move forward or make easier progress than those who don't have that. So I hope that these tools and this sort of broad overview, if you want to call it that, of brain retraining, regardless of the program, is helpful to you. And I wish you every success on your retraining journey. I hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.